Christine, and I'm the Tennessee Energy Democracy Field Coordinator for an organization called Appalachian Voices. We are an environmental advocacy organization that works to protect the land, air, water, and people of central and southern Appalachia. A lot of that is, a lot of the work we do is sort of focused on a just transition from coal to clean energy. That includes a lot of work in coal mining communities, coal plant communities.
I am involved with Safe Tennessee, Safe Affordable Good Energy. I am one of the founding members. My background is I'm just very passionate about the environment. I'm an herbalist and a forager in one of the affected communities. And when I found out there was an Enbridge pipeline coming through my community, I decided to get involved.
So I'm actually one of the co-founders for SAGE. It stands for Safe, Affordable, Good Energy Tennessee. And we are a grassroots organization fighting a pipeline. TVA has contracted a company called Enbridge to build a 122-mile-long gas pipeline through Middle Tennessee.
The expansion project is looking to go through 7 counties in rural areas in Tennessee, 59% of which are environmental justice communities. So looking at going through areas where people don't have the resources to combat the negative effects this pipeline is going to bring with it. Its intention is to replace a coal plant in Kingston. Its intention is to pivot over to natural gas as a way to be more environmentally friendly, but on paper that doesn't add up to a sustainable future. It is not the most modern technology that we have for that. The TVA is a federal utility company that is not in alignment with what the federal government is demanding from them for being net zero on carbon emissions for electricity. This natural gas plant, it's fracked methane gas is what they're trying to pump through these 7 counties to get to this Kingston plant. It is negligibly very small amount better than the coal plant. It's not making that much of a difference, but it's going to cost ratepayers a significant amount of money.
TVA is a federal utility that was created in the 1930s as part of Roosevelt's New Deal program, and a big part of its mission was to lift rural folks in the Tennessee Valley out of poverty. And it seems like they've gotten really far from that mission in a lot of ways. So the Ridgeline pipeline is one piece of TVA's gas build-out. So right now, TVA is planning the largest gas build-out of any utility this decade. So since 2020, they've proposed and built some of these already, 9 gas plants, 9 gas power plants, and 3 pipelines are connected to this build-out. They're not in the business of building pipelines, so they contract with private companies to do that. The 3 in their queue would be built by Kinder Morgan and Enbridge, so Ridgeline would be built by Enbridge. But I just want to emphasize that Ridgeline is part of a much bigger gas build-out in the southeast that the TVA is trying to rush forward, and I think it's something that we all really need to pay attention to, because it's gonna impact the people and the ecologies of this place for so many decades to come. And I think TVA is really well suited to, be a model for utilities in this country, right?
We've gone to different TVA board meetings, and we've gone to those meetings not only with people who have submitted comments online, but we've stood up ourselves and spoken to the TVA directly about our resistance to this and why we don't want it. The first option is they need to diversify their portfolio. I definitely think the West tends to lean towards singular solutions for complex problems, but we need to think of complex solutions for complex problems.
I know that there are a lot of places that are doing better than what the TVA is proposing. There are a lot of places around the country that are putting in solar fields, they're putting in wind turbines, they're putting in green energy. They are utilizing more modern technology.
If you look to like Midwestern companies, they're heavily investing in renewables, in wind, in solar, in hydroelectric, right? And like the TVA used to, like, that was part of their mission, right? Like in the beginning, like hydroelectric power, we weren't talking about all this coal, we weren't talking about methane. And so there's this myth of progress, right? Like that we need this in order to meet our energy needs. And then there's also this myth of like transition, that somehow like gas is the intermediary step when we look at other like utility companies, power providers around the US and around the world, and that's not what they're doing. I think the TVA has lost its way, right? Because the Nolichucky Dam has stood for over 100 years and saved countless lives because it held. It did not fail. And yet these methane pipelines, there is one major pipeline failure reported to the federal government roughly every 2 days. It's like not quite 48 hours, but it's roughly every 2 days. And those are the major pipeline failures that are big enough to like have to be reported, right? There are smaller leaks and failures all the time.
That's what I want people to understand is, you know, there are things in this life worth protecting. People are a big part of it. The people and the environment are one and the same.
Ever since I was a little boy, my grandparents, I grew up all over the place. My dad was, he did his PhD at Vanderbilt, but he was an intelligence officer in the Navy, so we moved everywhere. But I would spend my summers here because both my maternal and paternal grandparents had farms here, so I would spend the summer here. And my family were the first settlers in this area too, after the Third Treaty of Tellico in 1805, when the Cherokee ceded the rest of their land to the federal government in what's now Middle Tennessee and opened this area up for settlement. As a kid, I'd roam the creek bottoms and the woods on my grandparents' farm and always find evidence of native folk being there, broken tools, debitage, flakes from the church when they were making tools. And I always wondered about the people that lived here before we were here. And I never, even as a little boy, I didn't see them as some exotic other, that they were just people like we are. And when I got a little older, I just couldn't stand the idea of people leaving native burial grounds, cave burials and so forth, because you wouldn't think about doing that for anything. You wouldn't go dig up somebody's great grandma out here in the cemetery and take her jewelry or anything like that. So from the time, as far back as I can remember, I was always interested in the people that lived here before we were here and what they were like, how they lived. I went to school for a while at Memphis State, back when it was Memphis State many years ago, and studying anthropology, and we went down to Walls, Mississippi, a woodland site just south of Memphis, and an extensive mound complex there that had been plowed under, and there were literally human bones just scattered across the surface of the earth there, the ground, where they'd cut into them with these huge plows that they used because they planted cotton there. I had never seen anything like that before or since, where you could just pull your work truck up and get out and just see the bones of people, of human beings who had lived and died there, scattered. I think it was around 2023. I may be wrong about that, but they finally started to release their remains back to different native groups, tribes, to repatriate the bones, rebury. And that's unfortunately been common occurrence throughout the years when people came in and just bulldozed and plowed, with no thoughts about who was here before. Well, I'll just reiterate, because my whole thing is education. When I was cultural resources manager, that was a big component of my work. I had 14, all the counties in the Upper Cumberland had 14 counties and 6,000 square miles. I was the only guy in it doing what I was doing. So a big part of what I did was education about preservation issues, prehistoric and historic preservation issues. And, I would do, go around to different communities and talks and lectures and, to distribute literature from the U.S. Department of the Interior and state of Tennessee, so people would have it so they could see what the rules and regs and the laws were. And those were always well attended. It was, people are very interested in that sort of thing. And a lot of people just want to know what it's all about, what the laws are. And some because they want to get out and dig around, and others because they want to keep people from getting out and digging around. It all starts with the individual landowners, the community, people in the community. And that was always where I started, because that's where you get results. Because if you allow federal and state agencies to do all the work for you, it's never going to come out exactly what you want it to. Because sometimes, there's just no law against, whatever it is that you may be concerned about. There are a lot of laws concerning, burials and digging into burial mounds and things like that. But you need to educate yourself and know what the laws are. And, I think everything that started at the local level. I think there again, it's going to be up to us sitting here in Cookeville, Tennessee, in Bangor, Maine, or Los Angeles, California, wherever it is. Nobody's insignificant. And, we've got to work together, man.
Lots of neighborhoods, and I've got friends who live in areas close to the pipeline. If an explosion or an accident were to happen, I don't know that they would be able to get out of there safely.
Building this, Enbridge's safety record is terrible. Even compared to other companies that are building similar pipelines and similar infrastructure, Enbridge's record is atrocious.
Yep.
And they've killed workers, and they've, their pipelines have led to explosions, which have led to fires. There was one in Kentucky that happened in, I believe, 2019. It was either 2018 or 2019 that burned over 30 acres. And if you look at some of these subdivisions that they want to run this pipeline through people's literal backyards, that's the whole subdivision gone. They are straight up engaging in misinformation to intimidate these landowners. And when a big company comes and knocks on your door and offers you $10,000, for some people that's life-changing, right? So I understand the temptation to take the money and to cooperate, but I also understand the temptation of no, I don't want this on my land, and I don't believe in this. And so I am deeply sympathetic to the landowners.
My name is Michael Hawkins. I'm born and raised here in Tennessee, Middle Tennessee. Lived here my entire life. And then I run a little farm in Jackson County, down in Flynn Creek, where the pipeline is crossing my property. So I come to this from a different angle than a lot of other folks, in that a lot of the folks in Sage are concerned with the existential threat, that's great, that's a fabulous thing. But I am more concerned with the threat to my personal way of life, to my personal property value wise, and the effect that it will have on the way I've lived for the last 40 years. And then when I found out that it was going to cut my farm in half, that's when I really got involved. I got super involved at that point, I think, and went to lots of meetings, had lots of discussions with lots of people, talked to people, did interviews with folks, and the pipeline people they stood up and they took notice of that. I took away that folks would listen, and they wanted to hear my concerns, and they were, a lot of it came across as, well, it's a done deal, because there's this thing called eminent domain. They all are on kind of the same, they're coming at you from one direction, and they're not really interested in, doing anything to try to stop the pipeline. I mean, they're for it, they want it, they feel like they need it, So I was swimming against the current a whole lot. It was basically what I took away from it. But I'll tell you what, it did help. I've settled with Enbridge, and I've reached a settlement with them that is, I got what I wanted out of them. Now, well, almost. The one thing I did not get is I did not get the pipeline stopped. But then I think even I see the inevitability of it, but you should never give up. Don't give up hope. That's what I keep telling myself. I taught biology in high school, and so you can imagine that field biology, field botany is my thing. I know all the trees and a lot of the plants, and ecology is an important area of study that I love to teach it as a high school biology teacher. It's right down my alley, having this place, this untouched, pristine, isolated farm in Jackson County, where there are very few people that live there. And before the pipeline people contacted me, I thought I had it made down there. This was my little paradise on earth. It made me happy. It changed my way of life, because now I'm going to have this 100-foot wide gash through a little over 5 acres of my 85 acres. That's about 1/16 of the entire property. They're going to cut down the forest, and they're going to put a pipeline, a 30-inch high-pressure methane gas line, within 200 yards of my house. Okay? Now, I don't know if you saw the one that just exploded in Texas. Okay, but there'd be lots, if one exploded as where it's closest to my house, a lot of the forest would be toast. Okay, and I could be toast if that thing went off. Okay, so there's a certain amount of tension that it creates, right? Yeah, sure, it's underground. Yeah, but you don't forget about it. You know it's there. Okay, and in addition, I became a bit of an armchair geologist when we bought this place, because you see, my farm sits in the middle, in the central uplift, it's called, of one of the world's most well-preserved ancient impact craters. It's the best preserved ancient impact crater on Earth. But to get back to the pipeline, what do the pipeline people want to do? They want to just dig a trench through it, right through the middle of it, okay? Which I don't think is a good idea. I think it should be preserved. I think it should be a national treasure, okay? There's the matter of the water, okay? I haven't talked about the water yet, but I've been drinking this spring water for 40 years, since we owned it, since we bought it in '87. I don't drink the stuff that comes out of city water, okay? I don't like it. It doesn't taste right to me. this water is the water I drink. Well, the pipeline is going to involve blasting, okay? To blast this trench through a lot of rock that they're going to have to go through it. They're going to have to blast. And I fear that my spring will be ruined. I'll keep drinking that spring water, I guess, until they blow up the spring and the spring goes dry, or they pollute it. I don't know. It's the only source of water. If that spring goes away, then my property basically becomes worthless, unless there is city water run to it. Okay.
So the Ridgeline project, there's like a whole neighborhood that's basically right in the path of this proposed new pipeline. And I've been working with one of the homeowners in that neighborhood in particular, her husband, and they've got a beautiful garden and all these amazing trees and just a beautiful space that they cherish, where wildlife passes through, and all of that is under threat. And they've been really disheartened lately because Enbridge reps keep showing up to their door and trying to get them to sign these contracts, and they're having a lot of health issues, and therefore they're having a lot of issues with money. And so they've been feeling the pressure. This one family in particular, they really don't want to sign it. And I guess a light spot is a victory, even though their across the street neighbor recently relented and signed a contract with Enbridge and got drastically underpaid for what they're giving. They're giving up a huge, beautiful old oak tree and their whole backyard fence and all these things that are very important to them. But the bright spot is I recently connected the first person I mentioned with representation that's going to take over the process, and so she won't have to talk to Enbridge anymore. And they're going to work with her on a contingency basis, and so it won't cost her anything out of pocket. So that feels like a potential win, empowering this person to not have to worry about money coming out of pocket. I always want to say and bring around to like the land acknowledgement we got to hear at the beginning of this event today, and just always remind people that there are human beings, whose not only just our bodies but our spirits are connected to these places. And back to my being a queer Southern Appalachian kid growing up in a small town, these places, these sacred rivers, these places where I spent my whole childhood and I still go every chance I get, they're my spiritual home, and they're the places and the rivers and the rocks who took care of me when life was difficult socially. So I feel stronger for that relationship. I know a lot of other people feel that way too, and I want people to know it's okay to say that. It's okay to say that you love the earth, you love the river, and you love to be barefoot and feel that grounding power that you feel when you're there.
I have the honor and joy of working with folks that are impacted by both the Ridgeline pipeline and by this proposed Kingston gas plant, and helping them try to move decision makers, right? Because the people in power need to hear from the people who are actually impacted by this. They need to know what it means for people to have, the dogwood trees that have been on their land for generations, clear cut by Enbridge. They need to hear from the people whose well water would be at risk should there be spills during pipeline construction. And so part of what I do is, I help folks share those stories with decision makers, participate in these really wonky regulatory processes that are not built for people. They're not built for, regular folk to participate in. In 2008, a dike containing coal ash from this coal plant, the Kingston fossil plant, ruptured. It was December 22nd, a few days before Christmas. And it released over 1 billion gallons of coal ash slurry into the surrounding neighborhoods and waterways. And it took workers almost 7 years to clean it up. The spill was actually the largest industrial spill in US history. It's 10 times the size of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. So even though a lot of people still don't know about it, this was the largest industrial spill in US history. And so I think the fact that they want to put another polluting power plant there is a real issue of environmental justice. You know, there should be no sacrifice zones. This was the site of environmental disaster, and communities are still suffering, especially the workers who cleaned up this spill. And not only that, but folks in Kingston have also been enduring nearly 70 years of coal plant pollution. And I think that they deserve better from TVA. TVA has a responsibility to do better for the people of Roane County and for the Tennessee Valley.
There are a lot of people that do not want this pipeline that have no idea that they're trying to make this happen. There are people that are in directly affected areas that have no idea that it would cut through their neighborhood because there's not been a lot of transparency at all from TVA or Enbridge. They basically inform the people that the pipeline is directly going to be on their property, and that's it. So the neighbor has no idea that this is going to happen. So we've worked really hard on getting that outreach and going door knocking and starting letter writing campaigns, and then trying to rally these people that we have reached out to then get their comments and their concerns directed where they need to go. So directing their comments to the TVA, to FERC, I gave a statement to the White House Environmental Justice Committee to get their attention onto the TVA and how the TVA is not in compliance with what the federal government is asking. So it's just getting these voices heard by these people in power. What they're proposing for this pipeline is to transition to a plant that is in some areas actually going to pollute more. In some areas it is going to pollute less, but it's not a significant amount. It's not going to be significantly cleaner. And then in the meantime, what they're going to be doing with this pipeline is looking to upset, 7 counties of sedimentary soil, contaminate the water supply. It could cost farmers their livelihoods if their water supply becomes contaminated, as well as people that live in like these rural areas. They don't have access to city water at all. They rely entirely on groundwater. So if their water becomes contaminated, it could cost them tens of thousands of dollars just to be able to get city water on their property, which is not something that they can afford to do. And if there is an eventual leak, there is going to be evacuation zones where people aren't able to evacuate. They don't have that capability. There's a lot of disabled people without vehicles. These are very, very rural areas. I am not on a piece of land that it will be affecting directly, but I am downstream from a lot of the water crossings. There are hundreds of water crossings that they're wanting to like dig up in these waterways and put this pipeline down. And I am downstream from those. And I do rely on the groundwater where I live. There is no access to city water. I have a creek on my property that could become contaminated. I'm an herbalist and a forager, and I rely on the biodiversity in my community for some of my business needs to be able to go out and lead herb walks. And one of the affected locations, which is Washmorgan Hollow Preserve in Jackson County, it is an extremely biodiverse place that's just kind of tucked away out there, and that's where one of those stream crossings is going to be, is on that Spring Creek Road. And I go there every spring to do herb walks, to teach people about this biodiverse place and what these plants are. There are college students that go out there to get to work on like their botany and biology degrees because of the biodiversity there. So that's an area that I am very concerned about. The community as a large relies a lot on tourism to bring people in. That tourism is almost entirely water. There's a lot of parks out there that people come out every weekend from like the more populated areas. They come out to kayak, to go swimming, to go to Roaring River Park. Like people come out there. There's been businesses that have been able to do really well in this town that had previously has not been a good place to have a business. They have been able to do well because of people that are coming out there for the beauty. So I'm looking at it from that perspective of what this pipeline could damage could be generations to come of like an economic like harm being caused.
I mentioned I like to go hiking. I like to go hiking at Cummins Falls. This area is very special and near and dear to me, and it would go upstream of Cummins Falls. So it would affect the water, the animals that live in the water, the animals that rely off of the water, and of course the people who rely on it. That particular falls brings in a lot of tourism for Cookeville and the community and the county, and so losing that would hurt us. But also, I just don't want to see the loss of any of the nature here that's unnecessary.
Between 490 and 550 water and wetland crossings. And we're talking bodies of water as large as the Cumberland River. It crosses the Cumberland River in multiple places west of here. But also these tiny little creeks in hollers. This is one of them that feeds into the Cumberland. It's one of its tributaries. But all water's connected, right? So like even if your individual creek or stream or river is not being affected by this, it will affect you, right? It threatens all of our livelihoods and all of our access to clean water.
There's this Indigenous leader who spoke at a conference in March in Silva, North Carolina, but he really urged those of us who were listening to the water can't speak for itself. You have to speak up for the water because it cannot speak for itself. If water could speak, what would it say?
I say tell my story, right? But I feel like it's the land story as much as it is a human story, right? I sit here and can hear the kingfishers and the crickets and the warblers, and I see the bedrock that's ancient, right? And to know that it's all gonna be negatively impacted, possibly destroyed in the name of human progress. And it makes me so sad. It makes me angry. I want to give in to despair some days, but the mantra that I keep like chanting to myself is that despair is a tool of the oppressor.
I'm Keyshawn Pearson, the president of Memphis Community Against Pollution. Our whole entire goal is to mobilize communities to fight against pollution, but also to make them more resilient as climate change continues to proceed. And so that's my role. In October 2020, there was a community meeting held in T.O. Fuller Park, which was the first national park that allowed Black people to go to the park. And in that park in 2020 is where our community met with Plains All-American and the Byhalia Pipeline Project presenters, who told us that we were chosen because we were the path of least resistance. We were chosen because the folks that were in areas that had more access to political power, more access to economic power, they refused to have this pipeline in their area, and so we were chosen. And the Byhalia Connection Pipeline Project was a project that was spanned across multiple states in order to connect Valero Energy's different refineries and then ship the crude oil out of the Gulf of Mexico for export. This project would have earned them somewhere between $5 and $7 billion a year, and was at the cost of our property, our land. The whole city and county got power because of our suffering. And so we've seen this before. And so this time we were ready, and I believe in a position where we knew we had to give everything we had. And so this expansion is ludicrous, honestly. It is an attempt to do the same thing and expect a different result. Right? It's frustrating that in 2024, right, when we have some of the most competent technology that we've ever been accustomed to, that we would attempt to do the same thing, right, to continue to jeopardize people's water that they need for potable water, or just our nature, right, the nature that we count on for our survival. I think it's disrespectful, truthfully, in certain ways, because it also is an attempt to re-adapt the Kingston plant, right? For instance, where there are proven cases of families who have died and are still dealing with the fallout from the coal mining and the coal ash procedures that they were doing. And so to go to this hollow ground where souls were lost and say, well, we're going to do it again, it is the disrespecting of Tennesseans. How do you reestablish trust, right, after it's been broken, after people have died? How do you reestablish trust? How do you reestablish that connection? And so for me, it is also the rebuilding of our communities that have been socioeconomically oppressed and have dilapidated buildings and have suffered, right, because of so much environmental change. It is an investment in public health that looks at treating folks who have been breathing in coal ash for decades differently than those who have not, and an investment there. It does look like a financial investment in green projects that help to provide jobs, but also to provide resilience in communities that are going to be hit first and worst, right, by climate change, and continue to bifurcate and say these things matter to me because it's in my area, but we all share the same sky, right? We all are in the same planet and need the same resources. And so for us, it took galvanizing people first, building people power first, educating people on what we needed first. And from there, that's when we got the marches, right? And so we went from marches with 4 people to marches with 50. We went from no legislation at all, right, until passing different legislation that even preceded the state level, in order that these pipeline companies aren't able to use eminent domain. But we also protected our schools from pipelines being so close to them in our communities. We were preempted by the state legislature, who attempted to essentially wash away all of our gains by passing a law at the State House that would essentially mandate that cities could not pass any legislation that would hinder pipeline corporations in any way. And so what we know is that the folks in Nashville some of them are intent and focused on continuing a legacy and a history of oppressive tactics rooted in white supremacist thinking. And what that does is continue to trap, punish, and harm Black communities, especially a majority Black city, like the city of Memphis. They were ahead of the curve. They had already paid certain churches. They had already paid certain organizations, Black and white, and public institutions like our colleges. And so what we know is that when colleges also take funds from organizations or corporations, they are less likely to be on the side of the folks who are fighting for progress. Because what I also saw out there were people who look all different races, all different places. And it reminded me just how much of a promise that we have if we continue to persist together. We have to persist together. And people power is not just reserved for a specific group of people in Southwest Memphis. People power is everywhere. It's all of us. It's in all of us. And as we continue to move forward, we have to continue to keep that mindset that no one deserves to live in a sacrifice zone, that everyone deserves to have clean air, clean water, clean soil. We all deserve all of these things as a human right, and we have to continue to work together as a coalition. And I know for a fact that there has been a little bit of a disconnect where folks have started to lose or waver in faith that if we come together, maybe we don't win. But I can tell you, and I know you've read about it, if you know anything about the Bahia Connection Pipeline, the best part of it was July 2nd, 2020 to 2021 when it was canceled. And so we can do this, and we have done it. We got proof that people, but they saw enough of a unifying message, because it wasn't just Southwest Memphis's water that would be threatened. But when this pipeline burst, it was all of our water. And one thing, if you ever met anybody from Memphis, we know we got the best water on the planet. And so we're gonna do everything we can to protect that. And it allowed us to protect each other. And that is something that was unique in our story and allowed us to build a coalition, the type of coalition that really causes transcendent change, that creates something that's sustainable long-term, that is a model for how we have to move forward as a community, but as a country as well. And so a just transition looks like educating a new workforce and ensuring that they can do the jobs of the next century. Making sure there is an investment, like I said, in renewables, making sure we're investing in solar and wind and hydro. The folks who are in Middle Tennessee, who farm, who live on their land, who live off their land, and have been there for generations. The people in Southwest Memphis and Southeast Memphis who are dealing with so much air pollution. It is for the folks in Kentucky, folks in Mississippi, all of these people who will be touched by TVA's plans and these pipeline expansions across different counties in Tennessee. And it is this manipulation of our public institutions, our silencing of our public representation that allows corporations to move in such a way. And so what do? Right? When a $1 billion company has everything stacked up against you, you count on people. And that's what we believed was the key factor, was people power. And we're gonna say it and we're gonna live it, because people power is really what changes things. And the one-click email matters. The taking 20 minutes to show up at the rally and put on a t-shirt, it matters. It really does. It does matter. And so my hope is that in all of our pipeline fights, in all of our fights for climate justice, for environmental justice, for social justice, that we all find space to grow in our faith in ourselves.
We're all going to be impacted if these pipelines and gas plants go through. They threaten our air, they threaten our water, they take away good jobs that our communities need to support themselves, and they disproportionately affect Black, brown, and low-income rural peoples. So I'm really concerned about investing all of this time and energy and infrastructure into outdated energy sources like gas when solar is readily available. And I also think that TVA needs to work with the communities where this energy is proposed to come up with a plan to build this infrastructure safely and in a culturally appropriate way in these communities. Even if we're building solar or other energy sources, TVA needs to work with communities to make sure that they're building it in a safe and responsible way in these areas. First of all, they need to actually listen with an open ear. So TVA has these comment periods that they're mandated to do by federal law, that they take people's comments for. They have TVA board meetings 4 times a quarter. But what actually happens after people come to TVA and voice their concerns? Because we see people showing up in droves to these board meetings, to these comment periods, to this rally today, but TVA, when are you going to actually do something about what folks in this valley are telling you? Because folks in this valley are saying that they want safe, affordable, renewable energy for their communities, not these exploitative gas plants and pipelines that has been TVA's MO for so long. So we definitely have safety concerns with Enbridge coming in here. Enbridge is supposed to operate many of the pipelines that are proposed in Tennessee, also Line 5. Keep connected to the movement and work with us to move past talking to action. So today at the rally, we introduced a petition to the TVA board. There are a lot of public comment periods that are available for folks to speak about why they don't want these pipelines to go through.
Sunrise is a youth-led climate justice organization. The elevator pitch for me is, we care about the trees, we care about polar bears, but we care more about the people who can be impacted by climate change, right? Like, it's the one thing I think just the general, like, the advocacy for climate change is consistently missed, that human beings are suffering the consequences, will suffer the consequences, and those human beings also tend to be the people who are historically downtrodden and cast aside. So my concern is that, like, TVA is doing this despite literally not needing to, right? So TVA decides to close down all of their, like, coal plants, the remaining coal plants, which was like, yay. Look, they want to replace it with gas, with methane. So the movement from TVA into doing gas, they're replacing their coal with gas, it doesn't make sense. It's like you saying, I want to replace my cell phone with, like, a smartwatch, which is cool unless you know that a smartwatch needs a cell phone to work, right? Like, literally, all of the gas plants they're trying to build need electricity to turn on.
District 3 is, I would say, one of the most unique areas of Memphis, because just about everything that's in Memphis is in District 3. We have the diversity. We have a lot of wonderful citizens who love Memphis as well. It's also home to Graceland, which is the most visited home in the United States, FedEx, and some other very strong, nationally known corporate brands. But simultaneously, we also take ownership in a lot of the poverty in Memphis, which is tied to the energy burden. And so while TVA, as well as MLGW, that's Memphis Light, Gas, and Water, our local utility, they continue to make claims about low rates and lowest rates. But because of the poverty, we have one of the highest energy burdens in the country. It's scary. It's scary because I know what they're capable of from a risk standpoint. They leak. At some point they leak. All pipelines leak. It's like I said, I did community engagement for SACE. That's something that's very important, getting this information out to the community. I was part of the ongoing protest that stopped the Valhalla pipeline in Memphis. Now our state representative, Justin J. Pearson, was an incredible leader. I found out about the fight against the Valhalla pipeline in the early stages. It was about maybe 2 months old. But Representative Pearson, he just had a set plan that we repeated over and over again. So we would start out at the Memphis Civil Rights Museum downtown. We'd have the rally, we'd speak, then we march down Main Street to City Hall, and we'd have some more speakers. And we repeated that over and over a period of months. We would do it about every 2 weeks, over and over again. And simultaneously, we were lobbying the legislative bodies. We were going to the meetings. We were sending the emails, and had a strong social media presence. And did these things over and over again until we were ultimately successful. And the pipeline, they pulled back at some point. They decided not to come. I'll say the crescendo of that movement was when Vice President Al Gore came to town to speak at a rally.
Yeah.
And we had about 600 people to turn out to this area, a remote area, but it's entrenched. It was this public park, but it was entrenched in the area in Memphis that's mostly affected by environmental injustices. This particular area has a cancer rate 4 times the national average. So it's just most apropos that we do it there. But Vice President Gore, he gave an amazing speech. He said that the pipeline was a racist, reckless ripoff, and it just went viral, and it was a hashtag. The next day, our native daughter, Sybil Shepherd, came and joined us in a rally in March, the one that I just described earlier. The day after that, our native son, Justin Timberlake, mentioned it live in a concert, and we had Danny Glover and some other celebrities to just come on board with this. And it was just amazing that we got that national support, not just from celebrities, but from other organizations around the country. I love this world because it's very meaningful, it's important, it has a lot of value. This encompasses everybody in society, and which brings also the opportunity to work with diverse groups, because environmental and energy justice affects everyone, and I love that part about it as well.
I would love to see all of our movements come together and to fight for a nation, because I think our voices are most powerful together. And that was a huge purpose of this rally today, is to unify people, rural people who are facing these gas plants and pipelines, the urban folks, the folks living in urban centers like Memphis, bringing everyone together, because these companies that we're up against are very powerful, and the only way that we can take them down is together.
And I know for a fact, one of the things that has to change the course of history is our faith in ourselves, and our faith that every single person counts. Everything you do counts. Everything you do matters. One person, one single person can change the course of history. Is reach out to your state legislators, reach out to your city governance folks, and if you don't have those folks, then reach out to these organizations that are all across Tennessee, all across the United States of America, who are focused on moving us forward. Because it is an email, it's a phone call, it's showing up at the state legislature, it's showing up at city council or your county commission, it's showing up at the rallies, right, for Clean Up TVA. It's showing up, and finding where you can show up, where it fits for you and fits in your life. I think that's the best thing you can do. I think one of the most important things to do is to connect with anyone who is already doing the work. If you know or find any group who is fighting against this pipeline, against this expansion, or any type of environmental justice issue, I promise you this, they need help.